talking about A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. This is the first of her Earthsea books. I believe there were 6 altogether. It came out in about 1970, and it is one of my favorite fantasy novels. Wizard of Earthsea is the story of a young boy named Sparrowhawk and his growth to maturity. When we meet him, he's about 10, and the odds are kind of stacked against him. And his progress through his life is paralleled by his progress, through the world of Earthsea itself. Earthsea is a really beautiful fictional universe where the world is mostly ocean, and there are islands scattered together. Most of them are roughly unified, at least linguistically. There's a little separate entity called the Kargad lands, these like 4 islands off in the corner who have their own traditions and religions and languages and their own appearance, but most of the rest of the world shares common stories and a common, sense of how the world works. Growing up on one of these islands is Sparrowhawk, and things do not begin well for him. His mother is gone, died giving birth to him. His father is distant and sees him more or less as disposable labor. But what he does have is an aunt who is the village wise woman. I think witch. The word witch comes up a lot in a way that now, after the sort of the rise of the neo-pagan movement and Wicca and so on, maybe it wouldn't. But she's the witch, but in a good way potentially. She notices that he has a magical gift, that he is able to use the true speech. Magic in Earthsea is sort of structured as based on a deeper insight into reality, knowledge of the true names of things in the original language in which the world was made. The world was made in an act of speaking, and wizards, knowing some of that language, can also alter reality. Much of, what there aren't many of them. You get the feeling there aren't many wizards, and magic in general is just kind of like a minor adjunct to most people's lives, like something you need when maybe like you're building a house. You might ask your local wizard or witch to like draw a protective rune on the door so it'll stay up. If you're sick, you'll go to the witch. If you're in really, really deep need of this is some sort of miracle, but it's not like the motive force of the world, the magic. It's just like an accepted part of reality. It's like, oh yeah, there's wizards out there, and a few of them live at the courts and serve nobles, and some wander around, and some teach magic, and some are just like the local wise person. So his aunt spots his gift and teaches him what she knows. She also secretly, I'm not sure that he ever discovers this, she also secretly tries to use her most powerful spell to basically make him her magical servant, like to bend his will to her, and it doesn't work. She realizes that he has more power than she does. So he helps the village using the little bits of magic that he has and his sort of innate natural gifts to stay alive during a pirate raid, and this attracts the attention of, but he pays a heavy price for it. He goes sort of catatonic, and this attracts the attention of a local wizard named Ogion. Ogion is like that mentor figure who realizes the potential that this person might have. So far, we're in a fairly traditional story about someone born with an unusual talent, but they're not in the right place where it can be appreciated. And so eventually, a mentor figure comes who takes them away. He goes away with Ogion. He learns his own true name. Each person has their own true name, which they will share with virtually nobody and only those most trusted. And he starts to serve as an apprentice to Ogion. And his Ogion is a wizard of the kind of mountain hermit type. He spends a lot of time just taking care of his goats. He doesn't do magic casually at all. Even the kind of casual magics that are generally accepted, he just doesn't. Ogion is like he does best who does least kind of school. You should only do stuff when there's an actual need. The point of having power is not to use it. Like, these are the lessons. But Sparrowhawk, who his true name is Ged, so I may call him both interchangeably. So Sparrowhawk and Ged, same person. Sparrowhawk is not ready for this. He's a young man, he's had a taste of power, and he's goaded into looking into Ogion's books and reading beyond his knowledge by this young woman he meets, and Ogion stops it from going too badly, but it becomes apparent that, Ged isn't ready to just kind of live up in the hills. He wants to be out and doing in the world and learning things and, expanding into his power. So, what do? Well, we send him to college. The solution of communities to talented and potentially dangerous youngsters for centuries. Send them away to school. There's a school of wizardry. It's on the island of Roke, which is like right at the center of Earthsea. And it's a fun school where it's only for boys and men, no women, and they, take on youngsters. Ogion sends them a letter of introduction. His power becomes apparent, even by the standards of wizards. He's really good. He makes very, very quick progress, and some of the masters at the school are really impressed, and they give him extra attention, and he starts to pick up notice. So, Ged has been tested against his village environment. He needs more. He's been tested by the first mentor. He needs more. He goes to Roke. He's learning all this stuff. He's very quick. He feels very talented, but he does have some, key problems that he has to struggle with. One is he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's embarrassed about his background. He feels like the people he's with see him as sort of like a rustic oaf, and don't take him seriously, even though he's so good at magic. So that's a problem. Two is he has no inbuilt sense of the purpose of limits yet. He wants to make progress quickly, and he wants to learn everything he can, and he doesn't yet have that patience. The parallels to Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars movies are coming home to me. He doesn't, he will learn patience. He doesn't have patience yet. He wants to be doing stuff. He's a hot-headed, talented, young guy who's worried that people laugh at him. Pretty common. Not hard to sympathize with. A struggle most people have had. So, like people with these problems, he shows off. And in his showing off, he's powerful enough that it creates a crisis, a horrible moment, an accident. He, uses magic more powerful than he can handle, and in order to fix his mistake, the head of the school, who's known as the Archmage, and it just occurs to me, Archmage would be a really fun title for like an old master architect. You win a bunch of awards, then you retire, and after that everyone gets to call you Archmage when you go to the conferences. Okay, so the Archmage dies fixing his mistake. He recovers slowly, and he's had his first great humbling moment. It's that moment when you first realize that life is not just a game you get to play, and there are serious consequences to mistakes that you can't lay off on anyone else. And Ged does the right thing. He doesn't try to avoid the consequences of his mistakes, and he also does not panic and completely give up on the goal of being a wizard that he has that he's set for himself and for which he is deeply gifted. Um, the new archmage encourages him and says, something along the lines of like, the archmage thought your life was worth risking his for, and maybe you should respect that. And he has a friend who encourages him to, he's like, you're born to do this. Don't give up on magic. You can make something of yourself. So he manages to finish schooling. He's not a hotshot anymore. He's much more patient, and he's a good wizard when he graduates. And he gets his staff. They give you a staff instead of a diploma, which is cool. And they get him a job. He goes out to a little fishing community called the 90 Isles, which is this a lovely little. I really like this part. Just these little tiny little islands where people live and where there's so much water and so little land that pretty much everybody learns to row and swim even before they walk. And they are worried that there are rumors that a dragon nearby to them is waking up, after its decades-long sleep. It might wake and rise one day and come and burn their towns, and so they want a wizard to sort of keep watch. So Ged goes out and he sort of agrees to be like their distant early warning device. It is known that the accident at which the Archmage died, that Ged may have unleashed something on the world, that it might not be over, that something from another realm might have wandered into ours, some sort of, horrible thing without a name. And Ged gets confirmation of this when he's trying to do some healing magic for a friend at the 90 Isles. He's trying to bring their child back. Wizards can, in the Earthsea world, wizards can visit the land of the dead and sometimes bring someone back. It's dangerous and perilous and all that, but it can be done. And he tries it for the first time, and he's interrupted in his attempt to save this child from death by whatever it was that he unleashed upon the world back on Rook. And the child does die, and his reputation is sort of clouded, and he decides he can't stay there. He can't stay. He's not fit. He's a peril to people. So he decides, but he also respects that they need him to protect from the dragon. So he decides, okay, I'm just going to sail off and take care of this dragon, and then I can leave. He's now in that state of mind familiar to people who maybe at some point in your life you have felt like the danger in your community. So Ged thinks that he's now a greater danger than even a dragon, and he moves on. I realize I have slipped into simply describing the events of the book, and I don't want to do that wholly, so let me get into why it's such a good book. For one, it's very efficiently written. It's very economical. There's no wasted space. There's no wasted verbiage. Things move. There's a lot happens in what's a pretty short book. There's a good balance between dramatic moments, descriptive moments, thematic moments, or moments that forsage the past or the future. The forsage moments that move in time. The conceit of the book is that this is a story about Ged that most people don't know, that he becomes a fairly well-known person in Earthsea history, and that works pretty well to frame it. There is a good range of characters, from mentor figures to antagonists to peers, to just like little tiny side characters who just appear quickly and then disappear, but who manage to imply a lot with very little. Like, for example, there's a scene where at one point Ged is building a boat. I think he's back on Gaunt, his home island, and he is building a boat, and he's mostly doing it with his just knowledge of carpentry, but he does using a little magic to build it well. And at the end, it has no sail, and he takes his staff and he just magically builds this beautiful sail of pure white linen. And some of the people watching just sort of like sigh with how beautiful it is. And you get a little glimpse right there of the life of sort of like hardworking people in this little fishing village who can appreciate the beauty of what he's doing, and sort of give a little gasp like, oh, one day I want to have a sail that looks that new, and where I don't have to save every scrap because it might be needed. It's just this little moment of luxury that appears in their life. About every couple chapters, this book has moments, dramatic moments or thematic moments that are just really well done, that stick in the mind. The moment when Ged arrives at the school on Roke, and the first thing he has to do is figure out how to actually get in through the door. The moment when he confronts the dragon. The moment when there's this moment where he's fleeing from this otherworldly horror that he unleashed, which has caught up to them, and he's fleeing across a sort of desolate moor that at night, when he doesn't know, he's never been there before. He doesn't know where he's going or where help might be had. He just has to flee. There's another moment where he is shipwrecked, and he lands on this island, this little island that's just like a scrap of rock, really. And he finds there are people living there. It has a freshwater spring, which is how they survive. And there's just this two people living there, this old man and this old woman. And he has to stay with them for a little while he recovers, and finds they've been there since they were children. There's like this whole implied amazing story behind their presence that he sort of gets enough to guess a little piece of, but never learns all of, and then he has to move on. The world is very real. The description of the world, the description of its society, a lot is done with a little, just implied. Le Guin is great at world building generally. It's one of the deep strengths of her book. Her father was a famous anthropologist, and she developed a great interest in people and land, and how they interact, and how the cultures build themselves out of their materials. Stories that are shared through Earthsea that imply this deeper history, but all very efficiently. It doesn't waste a lot of time or get in the way of the story. It feels like these natural little digressions from the main story, where Ged's story just happens to be the one that we're reading right now. Ged is not trying to save the world either. There's no sense of like really, really great events hanging on it. The stakes are clearly important to him, and possibly to the world. It's implied generally, but there's no. What matters is whether he is going to solve this riddle, whether he's going to respond to the various challenges that the world brings him in order to contest this otherworldly being that he's responsible for being in the world, and which is doing damage to the world while it pursues him. How is he going to figure this out? And what sacrifices will he make in order to do so? So as he grows into maturity, he learns humility, he learns courage, he learns selflessness, he learns more about himself, and it's really affecting to watch. He has some really pure, sincere moments with people in the book, and he becomes the kind of we get to actually watch someone becoming a sort of heroic figure, rather than just sort of being told that they're heroic and having them enter heroic circumstances. We get to actually watch him learn from his experiences, and not learn in some kind of cheap way. Like, they're dramatic, there are stakes, and the lessons are not always obvious. Every now and then someone just sort of does sit him down and tell him something, but not all the time. And there are setbacks and there are unexpected sorrows. Like, there's an excellent scene where he's meeting one of the few people he sees as just a friend, as a good friend. And this person doesn't know he's there, and he approaches him, and at first this person doesn't recognize him and sees him as a threat and immediately moves to defend themselves. And just the heartbreak of that, you know, you're living in this cold universe without family, with very few friends, because you've been such a arrogant guy your whole life, and now you're afraid that you'll cause doom to anyone. And one of the few people you really look forward to meeting and who you're sure is going to just enjoy your company instead treats you like a robber in the night. It works out, but that moment, oh, it's great. The whole book is full of great moments because it knows exactly where it's going and what it's trying to do, and it makes a wonderful build towards the next Earthsea books, which do continue to have Ged as a main character, although it's no longer his story. He plays major roles in those stories. So yeah, more than 50 years later, still one of the best fantasy novels, one of the best sort of education, growth from childhood to maturity kind of novels, and just has a few passages of writing that are so, you know, they don't sound like much if I just said them aloud, but when they grow out of this story, to me they take on a little bit of that element of sort of magic that, you know, you would want from a fantasy novel. A fantasy novel is not so much about, you know, building a world where magical things can happen or where the rules of reality are different than our current one. It's more about the experience of the book itself, giving you that frisson. Is that? Yeah, I think that's how you say it. That's another word I've only really read. Giving you that quaver, you know, of magic, of that unknownness. Things happen, and there's that touch of wonder, and wonder is built partly out of our sense of ignorance and uncertainty about what's just occurred, to be astonished. And so you can often get that feel of fantasy from, it's quite common in books that are set in nominally the real world. But when the attitude matches the writing, which matches the world, you know, effects build upon each other one after another, and you get some really powerful experiences. So, yeah, Wizard of Earthsea. Next, we'll move on to the second book, The Tombs of Atuan.